Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to another episode of Wise the Dome TV. Today I have a very, very special guest, man. I have the host of the Griot podcast, Brother Kofi and Brother Sean, also the authors of the new book, The Modern Day Griots and Griotis. Amazing book, The New Generations, amazing book. We're going to talk about the podcast. We're going to get into some of the contents of the book. We're also going to build on just like what it means to be a griot then and now, and I feel like this will definitely be an important conversation because if you know what a griot is, the transmission of our information from the wise elders to the youth is something that is an extremely important part of our progression as young Black men and women, but it can also be seen as somewhat part of the rites of passage of manhood and womanhood. And so I wanted to get into all of that. But again, thank you, brothers, for coming on.
No problem, man. I appreciate you, man, for having us on your platform, man. The Wise the Dome TV, man. This is my second time around on here, man. So I'm grateful, man, and humbled to be back on a respectable platform, man, with sincere, what I'm saying, and positive information, man.
Indeed, man. Hey, pleasure's all mine, and this is like I said, we're gonna keep it going. The podcast is always home for y'all. So, but let's get into it. The Griot podcast, great podcast. Brother Kofi, Brother Sean, what made y'all start it up? And for those who might not be tapped into it yet, what can they expect on the podcast?
Go ahead, Sean. I'll let you go in and answer this question if you will.
Yeah, sure. So I've been first and foremost, I love saying this. I was a fan of Kofi for years before he and I ever connected. I was like anybody else, watching YouTube, watching his lectures, watching his presentations, sharing it to my friends. Like, man, you gotta check this out. Loving what he was doing. And then ultimately we made acquaintances, and I was a guest on his show years ago. He had an author show, and I was the guest on there. And then years go by during the pandemic. He was a guest on my platform with his books, promoting his work. And we realized that our natural chemistry was so just naturally on point.
Right.
And then after that, we were so aligned in our mindset on various things. So it was like, you know what? We should do a podcast together. And we're going to talk about being the Griot. Both of us are authors. Both of us are podcast hosts. Both of us have presentations and lectures. It's only right to do an actual podcast about why we chose that lane and why we carry that torch, right? It's kind of the birth of the Griot podcast. But what you can expect, Kofi has a long background studying African traditions, principles, culture, the food, dialect, the whole nine. Right. Not just a little surface kind of person. He spent time going deep in that thing, and I love that about him. So Kofi can give you that historical, traditional prospect of what the roles of a griot and a grioti is, the many roles that they played, and then how do we look at today's lens? How does that look today?
Right.
What is our responsibility that we carry today to tell our ancestors' stories, to our youth, empower them, right? And then we also every show have a different topic that we are focusing on, and we're doing a whole 360 view of that particular topic per month, and that's on YouTube, by the way.
Dope, yeah, and the link will definitely be in the description. You mentioned something, and anyone feel free to answer this, and we'll just keep that format like for the rest of the show. Whoever want to answer, just answer. If you both or just one, we'll do it like that. But Sean mentioned something, important about the telling of the ancestors' stories. In 2023. Why is that important now? Why are the stories of our ancestors at home and abroad important for our, growth and development as Black men and women in today's society?
Can I say a little piece real quick?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll piggyback off. Off of you.
I never want to cut my brother knowledge, man. But I'm gonna give a small example of why it's important, right? We all see what's going on right now in Alabama. They're commemorating the church bombing, right? We all know about the church bombing. Whenever I say the word Alabama church bombing, the image in your mind is probably those 4 sisters, rest in peace, respect. Until last week or so, not many people realized there was 2 brothers that lost their lives that day.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A lot of folks that study our history, that's their career. They didn't even know about these 2 brothers.
Yeah, one was killed by the police.
Killed by the police, right? I didn't realize till about a month or so ago, one of the 4 ladies, she's still alive to this day. So to answer your question, in 20 seconds, why it's important to tell these stories? We got to get these stories complete and get these stories right.
Right.
Because I'm in my 40s. I don't know y'all ages. I'm not gonna make y'all say that, but I'm just saying I've been this long. It's been 41 years of Black History Month, and I ain't never heard that before.
And for the record, I just found this out about 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Same thing.
It's not. I haven't been holding this knowledge for years, months, and I do a lot of studying, but I just found out about this a couple weeks ago, and
it's so much piecemeal storytelling. And then we get the same things regurgitated without going deeper, without going wider. So things that Kofi and I discussed on the Griot podcast, we pride ourselves on our journalism.
Right.
We are authors, we are lecturers, everything else, all the other titles. But we pride ourselves on our journalism too. We're not just coming on that pressing the little record button and giving y'all
and freestyling and yeah.
I always harp on this. I'm not saying it for a money grab. They don't know how many books that Kofi and I buy per episode. I just said the word buy. Ain't nobody sponsored. Well, we got a sponsor now officially. I ain't saying nobody. But not many people are sponsoring us. Like, man, go ahead and get them books to do a good show.
Right. Wow.
We go and buy documentaries to watch. I didn't say the word. Somebody giving us documentary money. He take his money. I take my money. We work for to give y'all a good show. Right. So we trying to go deep on the topic, not just skim the topic. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna leave it right there on that topic, man.
Yeah, great, man. But yeah, we definitely need it, for if we my thing is, and I keep saying it, and I'm gonna just keep saying it till everybody get it in their psyche, is we got to tell our stories from our own perspective and from our own world and from our own worldview, right? So it's very important to share the stories, those stories that our ancestors, or those things that our ancestors did, right, in order to, one, to inspire, to uplift, and especially for our new generation to have a higher self-esteem about themselves instead of a low self-esteem about themselves, because a lot of people that doesn't look like us are telling our story and telling our story wrong, right? They're not telling about the major contributions that our ancestors made, right? So they are skipping or cutting out centuries of information dealing with us and going straight to here and say, boom, this is where these people started. So it's an empowering and uplifting those who are telling the story, those who are writing the story. And most of the time, those who are writing the story are those who don't look like us, those who are of European descent, those who of Arab descent, right?
Right.
So they are telling it in their own perspective and their own worldview to make them seem more better than the next race or better than the next, next group of people.
Indeed, Sean, and go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add on a little 20-second clip to what I just said. It's a new book that came out a few months ago. It's called King. It's about MLK, right? By Professor Jonathan Eig, right? EIG. Eig. He did a phenomenal book on Muhammad Ali, by the way, too.
Okay.
But in that book, there are so many people attached to MLK life. You barely and rarely ever hear about some of the speech writers, some of the organizers. Like, we only see that one man in our head.
Right.
We're talking about a cabinet, especially for the president. He got a cabinet, right? We're talking about a cabinet of people that was giving the man information, knowledge, giving the man all this strategic planning and backing.
Right.
That's not even talked about.
And you never hear about them.
Most of those names.
Yeah. You know,
I'm
that's
like,
kind of,
what?
that's I'm glad you said that, because like whenever y'all were giving your answer, and Sean made the point to say, we have to get the history right. And Kofi brought up about, and not even just that, the fact that we are seeing, um attack on Black history in public schools and everything. And the first thing that I thought about was Dr. King, right? And how they have made Dr. King something that he wasn't, to make it more, they have made the I have a dream speech the totality of Martin Luther King's ideology and politics, when he was a lot more radical than
Man.
that. They called him a communist at the time. He was ready to redistribute the wealth to the poor people, but this is not the Dr. King that we hear about. And also, just one thing, like, because you brought up a great point, and the notion about our ancestors, all they wanted, the only thing that they were fighting for was to be American citizens, is a narrative that they push within these spaces, in academics, through a public schools, and that our history is much more complex than that. You might have some that were looking at assimilation. You had some that were like, nah, we need our own separate piece of land. But it's all grouped in as to Black people were fighting for one ideology, which is for, to be American, to have voting rights, for civil rights, and this and that, and that's it. And that's totally not true. But yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to add on that what you said, right? They also give us our history like in a vacuum, like individualized, right?
Like all this stuff wasn't connected.
Right. So I love reading biographies, autobiographies, for example, right? But the more you dig deeper, once again, and you realize that, wait a minute, you mean Fannie Lou Hamer was getting down with this person,
Right?
and Nanny Helen Burroughs was borrowing money from this person, and Robert Church Terrell in Memphis was funding money to this person, and Ida B. Wells with that person. Like, we think about these people like Ida B. Wells, Robert Church, and then this person, instead of them being the collaborative,
and even Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois. We don't hear all of this connected. And I'm glad you said that, Sean, because that's why I love reading biographies as well.
It'll be a tragedy if I was to pass whenever I pass years later, and they don't tell the story of me and Kofi together,
right?
And Dr. Wade and Matt, Steve, and now yourself. If you don't put it together, the Sean P story is wrong. I'm telling you that on record right now. The Sean P story is incorrect. If you think that Sean P is an individual, is so smart, so talented, so skilled, no, I'm not. I got a cabinet of people that put me in position. This is not a standalone project.
Facts.
I gotta say that, man.
No, I'm glad you took the time to say that, because the deeper I began to study and get involved in my studies, the more I would, like you said, like I would say, okay, reading about Fannie Lou Hamer. Oh, in '64, Malcolm came to one of her events and spoke and brought her out. Oh, okay, the connectedness here. Ella Baker, like, she used to be down with Martin Luther King and then got down with SNCC, and like you start seeing, like, yo, this is not they didn't do this in an island. This was a movement, right? That had many different parts. Some ideologies may be like, all right. So, like, perfect example. There's this. I'm not sure where I got this from. It was gifted, but it was a book on the civil rights movement, and it had it had a list, enemies of Dr. Martin Luther King, and one of those listed was Malcolm. And it was like, yo, well, who's telling this story? Because they were not enemies. They may have had opposing ideologies on certain things, but that's on certain things. They had ideologies that were similar on others, but the idea that everything was separate, everything was an island, everything, like Sean said, was done in a vacuum, makes it gives the appearance, actually, it to the listener, to the person who actually buys into that idea that everything was done in a vacuum, it weakens what our ancestors did that came before us, because there were so many moving parts, an interdependentness of sorts. And that's what I love about taking deep dives into these stories. You brothers wrote a book about being a griot, and I feel like part of that, being able to have that responsibility of being a griot, you have, like you said, you have to get these stories right, and the little nuances and contextual things that most people don't really understand, the griot has to understand. Like, what are y'all thoughts on that?
I want to raise some. I want to raise something for Kofi right quick, because Kofi the expert at this. We have a part in the book talking about oral messages, right?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Kofi's chapter, oral messages, right? So I tell all of my people that I mentor that life is a big old contradiction, right? For everything you think about, there is a contradiction to it, right? You know, one of the supposed downfalls to oral messages is things get misconstrued over time, teller to teller. That does sometimes happen. And every person got their view of what happened, right?
Right.
So if you read about the Black Panther Party hypothetically, because this really happened, whenever I talked to Geronimo Pratt myself, about 40 minutes in a personal conversation, I'm talking about David Hilliard book on Huey P. Newton. I'm talking about Assata Shakur. I'm talking about Elan Brown. And Geronimo Pratt got personally pissed off at some of these names.
Wow.
Because he felt like their story was a false story or altered story or a fabricated story. And that's his personal take.
Right.
And every individual talks to somebody himself, that's their take. So as a consumer of a story, you got to be able to siphon out and decipher how you going to take it.
Right. Right.
And I want Kofi to go ahead on that with the oral messages, you know what I'm saying?
But yeah,
that was his chapter.
Yeah. When we talk about the oral messages or oral tradition, we're talking about stories that was passed down from one generation to the next generation, right? And a lot of people don't value oral tradition. And most of the time when we say oral tradition, people are speaking that it is mouth to ear. And you'll hear people say oral messages or oral tradition is not reliable. There will be no writing, and I made this specific in that chapter. There will be no writing without oral tradition. What can you write down if nobody was telling, you know what I'm saying, or passing these stories down? Right. Now, the story can get altered. If I tell you something, you go and tell somebody else something. But I look at everything through methodology. So there was a methodology when it comes to oral tradition. So it wasn't just about mouth to ear, right? It had different methods. So I talk about a historical aspect, the erotic aspect, the literature aspect, where they pass things down through proverbs. They pass things down through performance arts. They pass things down through singing. They pass down through reacting different war events. They pass things down through word to mouth. It was so many different ways that they was able to pass this thing down where it wasn't always just mouth to ear. So there was different methods in order for their story or their history to preserve, so it wouldn't be watered down by the time of the next century came. It's watered down. It's not, put in the right way. So oral messages are definitely an important part, to play when it comes to the griot. But the griot, like I'm saying, the griot, people think that the griots are just historians. The griots are more than just historians, man. Like, I give you a ton of things the griot does, but it all comes to us conveying information, you know what I'm saying? The proper information, conveying that information, that proper information out to the people. Again, like I said, whether or not I related into these or these times of the day, like a podcast hoster, like what we are doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We will be considered as a modern day griot, and that's what we are, modern day griot.
I do want to ask you something, Brother Kofi. When it comes to oral history, what are your thoughts on the fact that many scholars, including especially white scholars, um, dismiss oral history and academia as to say that we had primitive civilizations because the history in some cases was only passed down orally and maybe not passed down through written works. I see that a lot in academia sometimes where they try to make cases that written works are more important than oral traditions. To me, that's like, well, no, I'll let you go ahead and answer. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm saying, that's untrue. That's why I talk about it. I that chapter 3, oral messages. I did 2 presentations. I did a presentation on Kofi Piche TV, and I did one on Mossy Warrior Clan Part 2. So I go into the discussions about the same thing where academia, and this is where a lot of people regurgitate a lot of this information from. A lot of the Europeans saying that we was primitive, and I don't understand that, because you saying primitive civilization. When you saying civilization, that's an oxymoron in itself. How can we be primitive and create a civilization? Because hence we have to be civil in order to create a civilization.
Right.
But anyway, so I go into the chapter. I'm gonna turn to it real quick, and I'm gonna get off over here. So I go into just to hush some of those things when people say that they are reliable, because people do regurgitate that stuff that you're talking about. So I go into the methodology and I talk about the categories. So I talk about African oral traditions in 3 different categories. So I talk about it from a literary standpoint. I talk about it from a historical standpoint, and I talk about it from an erotic standpoint. So, and I ain't gonna go too far, but I said in the literary, it includes poetry, or poetics, because a griot is poet. And we tell our stories through poetry. That is another art form, right? Poetic gestures, divination, which we know divination is a part of African culture and tradition, poems, and songs. Because the Griot, she also sings. You know what I'm saying? The Griot tells our story and preserve our history and tell the contributions that their society or their people or their family made through writing songs and expressing those songs. But I go on and talk about it from a historical standpoint. I'm not a historical standpoint where we talk about folklore, folktale, and narratives, right? Those things are embedded into African culture, right? So we telling our stories through these folk tales, through these epics, or what we're calling novels, these novels today, to preserve our history, but also give a life lesson in some of those things that our ancestors did. So when I go into the erratic part, so people make those suggestions because they don't understand African culture in its totality. So it's easy for me to say that because I don't know it. Okay, shoot, by the time it get down to Joe Blow next week, it's gonna be something different, right? So there are many methods that they utilize that and I explain and go in depth in, and even in those presentations on how they was able to preserve and keep a lot of their information intact. And it wasn't by just one way where somebody sitting in a circle, like most of the time you see a griot sitting there with children in a circle, or a griot amongst his other griots, and they're sharing their stories from mouth to ear. It's much more than that.
Indeed. Go ahead, Sean.
I just want to add on to what Kofi said with more information, with new information, right? Because once again, all of us are older in this room. I don't know when y'all went to school or whatever. I didn't find out until last year. We had but Reggie on our panel for the book release, right? Reggie Reads from the Books of Pop Culture podcast. They interviewed a brother last year, Justin Tinsley. He wrote the book on Biggie Smalls that came out last year, right? I didn't find out until that podcast. In college now, it wasn't that way when I was in college. In college now, for your reliable sources that you're citing on your schoolwork, you can now add a podcast to that.
Wow.
So I can, a person in school right now, they can go and source Kofi and myself Griot podcast in their document, and that could be certified as a reliable source.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
For those that didn't go to school, For those that didn't go to school, there's an actual way you verify and certify what's reliable and what's not. You can't just put anything on your paper.
Right.
And if you got it wrong, you got points taken off of your project because it's not a reliable source. That's the reliability of oral. But now we can use the Drink Champs podcast in my paper. I can use something off BET in my paper. And this whenever I was in school 6-7 years ago. So they're opening the doors slowly on these things.
Yeah. Wow. And I found out about that, man, probably about 4 years ago or 3 years ago. It was a person that reached out to me that watched my show. I did a show dealing with performance arts, and telling story through performance art, acting. And I did it from an African perspective. And I can't remember at this time what the brother went to school for, but he used my presentation, my lecture off of Mossy Warrior Claim into, I was one of he cited me in his dissertation.
Wow.
He used me as a source in there, man. And I was so honored. I wish and I can't even remember. And I can't even remember the brother's name, man. And he's actually from Mississippi too. But I don't forgot what his guy. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, man. And he inboxed me, man. I told everybody, man, but I didn't find out until that about 3-4 years ago.
That's dope.
You should, bro. You should.
One thing I wanted to ask you guys, both. I want both of you to answer. Outkast, one of my favorite groups, got a song called "The Art of Storytelling," and the transmission of wisdom and African and the diaspora, African societies in the diaspora. Why is storytelling a great way to pass cultural ideas and lessons down? We gotta go get the hump of Bob's back now.
It's like that. When you said it just so cold in my head. I just started jamming, man. But you want to go first, and then I come in, man. It's on you, man.
Yeah. It's all good, big brother. Yeah, we got to do that art of storytelling, man. Well, we all know the old saying is that the mother is the first teacher.
Right.
When you in your mama belly, forget about in the lab. When you inside the belly, if you're a parent on this live, whenever I had situations whenever my ex or whatever was pregnant, I was always so serious about talking to the belly. I want the baby to know my voice whenever they come out the womb. I was always big on that, man. Right. So the stories being conveyed and told starts, in conception, if you ask me, to be technical about it. But then let alone whenever you finally hear in this plane, your parents and your household, your family, they're the first ones making impressions on you.
Right.
So they are setting the tone of the culture, the traditions. At this time of year, we celebrating Juneteenth. At this time of year, we doing Kwanzaa or whatever you do. That's your business. But they're setting and embedding the tone on that first.
Right.
Before you go to school, before you go in the outside institution, the house is the original institution. So your grandparents and your parents and your siblings telling you these things, whether you believe them or not, is doing something to your subconscious mind that's getting planted there. And I just told a group in private weeks ago, we find ourselves in our 30s and 40s doing certain things habitually.
We acting like our parents, man. Like
you're being a robot, right? If I ask you, like, why did you do that? You probably can't even articulate why you put a certain thing in your rice. You put a certain thing on your grits. You put a certain thing on your. Why are you doing that, man? I don't know. I like it like that. You think you like it like that. Somebody in your household was doing it like that.
Right.
And you remember it like that.
Right.
So to make it a simple example of how the tone gets set, and you got to sometimes get an adult and reset if it's not profitable to your well-being, right? But so that's why I think that the storytelling in the family is so important, because they set it and they hard set that thing so fast, so early in your life. It sets the tone for your life, right? And I'll let Kobe take it off after that.
Man, I really can't do nothing else after that. That's crazy.
Well, Kofi, I'll ask this aspect of it. See is the art of transferring wisdom in the form of a story, does it make it easier for people to digest? Was that the idea? Some, with the griot in some instances, to where instead of just saying, hey, culturally we don't do this and this, compared to having a story that conveyed that same message. Do you think it's, that makes it more digestible?
The storytelling makes it more digestible. It makes it more relatable when you can relate it, a story, to something that they are actually experiencing and things that they're actually seeing in their natural environment. So that's why you see folk tales and folklore that is embedded in African culture. You cannot separate the art of storytelling from African culture at all, right? When you dig into it. So you will look at all these different folklores and these folk tales, and they're telling it from a simplest way where a baby or anybody can get the story, right? And they make it relatable where they can understand it, where it's not going over their head. So, and give you an example, like even when we tell stories, when you look at the stories of the cosmology stories, and I'm talking about the creation of the universe, the creation of the supreme deity, the creation of the lesser deities, because in African culture, there's not one ruling guy. There's and even when we say God, most of the supreme deities have a female counterpart, right? And then you have the lesser deities. So if they're talking about it, and we're looking at it from what we're looking at, it from a perspective. Oh man, and I studied this and I started studying this a while, but like thermodynamics and astrophysics, right? If I go to telling them, breaking down particles and the expansion and explosions and such, you're not going to understand me. You're not going to follow me. So now if I tell a creation story simple and put it in a story format where it's something that you see every day and experience every day, that story will resonate and carry with you, right? So it was very important for those stories to be told in that way.
Wow.
He just said something. He just said something so powerful, because I was gonna say, I know all three of us, we come from a background where you got to have your facts together.
Oh, most definitely.
Facts, stats, data, graphs, charts, anthropology, all this other kind of stuff, right? But I learned years later, and I tell my fictional writers how important they are. And I tell my fiction writing friends, what you're doing might be more important than what I'm doing. And they say, how's that? Because you doing this fictional, fantastical story will stay in their mind longer than whatever facts and data I'm selling.
Brother Sean, I'm going to tell you the truth.
That's just honest.
Brother Sean, up until maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I felt like, it was a waste of time to read fiction. I wouldn't. Then I started, going back to some of the older stuff, Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe. Then I read, some Toni Morrison and James Baldwin and Richard Wright, and just like some of the old, and I was like,
classics.
I was like, what? Like, I was like, this might be a fictional story, but the message that is being conveyed, like, that's real. You know what I'm saying? And you're right, it stays with you, and it's just as important. It's just as important as historical works. It's just.
I just told a young brother I mentor on a drive over here, I said, bro, this year I'm proud of myself. I probably read way more fiction than nonfiction for the first time in 15 plus years.
Right.
I told you earlier, I love biographies. I love autobiographies. I love our history, African history, Caribbean history. I love that stuff, man. But this year, I made more of a concerted effort to widen myself out. I'm reading freaking comics. I'm reading graphic novels. I'm reading young adult literature.
Right.
And I'm realizing the complexity in what they're dropping in these fictional tales.
Oh, it's complex.
And I raised up Brother Reggie again for the second time on this particular talk, because watching their podcast the past 3 or 4 years and the way they break down fiction for 3 and 4 hours at a time, it made me realize the depth of what's in there, man. I started really, really reading fiction different after watching what they do with fiction. Like, wow, this stuff is loaded, man. This stuff is loaded. So
I was reading the, like some Zora Neale Hurston. I think the last
That's
one was,
crazy. I'm reading her right now. And I'm
look,
reading. Sean put me on her. We're gonna talk about her on the next episode, but
right,
that's crazy.
and so I read Their Eyes Were Watching God, and that's what you're reading.
That's all right, so I'm reading.
So I won't get too much. But
it's all work. My book club read it last month. We read it last month.
Dope. Yeah, and when we get off air, let me know about the book club. I'm definitely down. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that she was an anthropologist, right? And when we get in, and like the story took place in Eatonville, Florida. Eatonville, Florida was really a black town that was created by former slaves in which she grew up in, right? So she's telling a story. It may be fiction, but this is based on it's a historical fiction, and she's able to convey like I looked at it like, all right, if somebody just wrote a book on the history of Eatonville, Florida, I might get some stuff from it and remember some things like, who founded it, what year it was founded, but the nuance of everyday life cannot be expressed in that manner. But the fact that she's writing a fictional book about a town in which she grew up in, she's able to convey what it was like there way better than any, just books based on nothing but facts and data would be able to. Because black people, like, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add, I'm so glad that Kofi is on this journey because, as I said earlier, Kofi is so steeped in so many things. The amount of things that he gonna see in it, African tradition wise, our Native American traditions, our other traditions, all that stuff is so laced in there.
Right.
If I can catch it, I can only imagine what he gonna catch enough. He go through that thing with that fine tooth comb. He gonna see all kind of stuff, and what they're doing with their indigenous medicines and their herbs and rituals and the things that they're doing there.
They talk, and she talks about that, and she got initiated into voodoo in Haiti whenever she did some work out there. She knew about.
Oh, I got to get back on the book. I got to
get it. She's really dope, man. She's really dope. But I'm glad you're reading it too, because like just what I got, what I not only just the story of what she's conveying in this book, and it kind of reading it kind of transports you to the world that she lived in, and you get to see how everybody interacted in it, and it's a beautiful book, man. And and so like when it comes to the art of storytelling, it's definitely important way to transmit our culture, our history. And I'm definitely thankful that on my journey that I stopped being so bullheaded and was like, yo, I'm gonna break down and read some of these fiction works by some of our great writers, because it's definitely worth it. What we kind of touched on it earlier. All three of us big fans of music. Most Africans are. What role does music play as far as the griot, even like from back in the day to now? Like what is the role of music?
I'll start from a historical standpoint, and then I want my brother, if he don't mind, wheel it on into the modern day time, right?
All right.
So, but you music, I don't care. In African culture, even up to this day, music is embedded in everything they do. If they out there in the fields and they're doing stuff for their harvest, right? There's drums and singing and dancing going on. If there's a ceremony going on, it's singing and dancing. If visitors are coming in, they're welcoming people in, they're singing and dancing. And so music is a vital key when it comes to our culture. That's why we love music. And I think we are, one of the most talented musicians in whatever era, whatever genre we step into, man. But music is a way also of sharing or conveying information. If you have the Griot, who has the kora, is one of the instruments, almost look kind of like a violin in some form or some type of harp, right? If you see him, and most of the time, historically, you will see even today with modern griots, because they have modernized themselves, but they still carry that instrument. You will see the griot beside him singing and dancing, and she's singing. She may be singing about a victory that they had over their enemies, right? And this is something to be, that she's passing down so people can get, because it like Sean said a while ago, we start doing things subconsciously and don't even know why we're doing certain things, right? And I'll listen to something, even if I don't like a song on the radio, if I'm listening to the song on the radio and I hear it so much, I could be just sitting in the house and I go to singing that song, man, or possibly doing something that the song, it just all depends. But music, this is the way that they was able to share and tell their stories and entertain in the same aspect, because we do that in the same sense today. A lot of our people that we love, and I'm speaking about us that we love, that we can name, whether it's a hip hop artist, whether it's a jazz artist, whether it's an R&B artist, or whether it's a blues artist, what we got out of that, what we learned, the life lessons that they shared, the things that we possibly didn't even know that existed, that our ancestors or what we are doing in real time. So music played also a vital role, because a griot was not only a teacher and a historian and an advisor or a warrior, which we skip over at times, but they were singers and musicians, right? And this was another way for them to deliver a story through their music.
Indeed.
Look how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go with the 50 years of hip hop approach, right? And for anybody that's younger watching this podcast later on, I gotta always say it like that. In our childhood, there was no internet. It was no World Wide Web. It wasn't no Wi-Fi and streaming. So until they on the West Coast talking about what's happening in Compton and Los Angeles and Oakland, and besides little small thing you seen on the 10 o'clock news, it wasn't no 24-hour news cycle. 10 o'clock news. You see in Rodney King of certain things happening. Besides that, the music told us about the police brutality and things going on over there, right?
Right.
Everything was so regional back then. So it took Master P and Cash Money to tell you what's going on with the Calio projects and the Holly Grove projects and what's going on here in the plight of New Orleans and Louisiana situation. So those hip hop artists were giving us the view of what's going on around them. A person like Nas, Jay-Z, whoever, telling you what's happening socially, economically. They're telling you so many things. That's why I love hip hop scholars. I've been 3 or 4 years studying that. The hip hop scholars, right? Because to us in the 90s, it was just good music.
Right.
And then these hip hop scholars break down to you. Do you realize in this Nas song, he covered these 4 or 5 genres in one song?
Wow.
Genocide and this thing and that thing and this thing. You be like, I didn't think about it that deep. It was a cold song.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if Nas thought about it that deep when he wrote it.
Right.
But it's here, right? It's here.
Right.
So those hip hop artists, like Kofi just said, those jazz musicians, the Negro spirituals, we can go all the way back.
Yeah.
They were telling stories in these songs. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It take you to listen a little more. Like Jay-Z said, do you really listen to it? Do you just skim through it?
Right.
You can't just skim through it.
And
you got to penetrate.
A lot of those songs, especially during the times when we were on the plantation had hidden messages, so the plantation owner didn't know what we were talking about. We were able to convey messages to each other by, they were like, oh, they're just out there singing again, but we was plotting.
Once again, Kofi knows this. He can tell you more than I can tell you. Over in Africa, they was communicating for miles with the drums. They was letting you know, man, somebody come and get ready.
Yes.
Man, this going on, get ready.
Yes.
Yeah, Kofi, if you can build on that a little bit. Nah, because that's powerful, man. Just to be able, like the reason why I think that's an important point that Sean even brought up is because it goes to the idea of we have to stop letting white academia tell us what is the standard for communication, right? What is the standard for the transmission of information? If I'm able to tell you a story or warn you by simply using a drum, that is not primitive. That's actually genius. You know what I'm saying? But when
I want to add one, go find it on YouTube, brother, all the time. The brother Dr. Wesley Muhammad, I love that brother. He had a whole presentation on the 808, the 808 drum.
Wow.
And the weapon, the phrase is the weaponization of hip hop. Go look that up. The weaponization of hip hop. See, we don't want to take the time to study these sciences, right? But these billion-dollar corporations, they study how many hertz to put a certain beat at, how many hertz it take to hypnotize you. They clone Tyrone, right? They use the beat to make you have a warrior mentality towards your brother. Oh, bro.
But look, haven't you heard of people?
You gotta check it.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. But haven't you heard like people like we've all even seen it, like especially during the crunk era in the club. The club wasn't a safe place, man. You know what I'm saying? With the type of music and what they telling you in the music, people don't think it had any type of effect on their psyche, but it definitely did.
Let me tell you what I saw one time at work when I had a blue collar job. I had a delivery job, right? I'm inside my truck watching my coworker. He a grown man older than me. He got his headphones on. I don't know what he playing.
Right.
But I promise on everything, I literally watched this brother get hypnotized and transform into a very aggressive state. He's sitting there by himself.
Right.
Ain't nobody telling him nothing, ain't nobody messing with his brother. He is working himself up via this music.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, this is crazy to watch this.
Right.
And this like 15 years ago, I just never forget the imagery of, wow, you're a grown man. And you're getting so transformed by this music.
Right.
And it's like 8 in the morning. Ain't nothing even happening.
Right.
We ain't even left the yard yet. You already gassed up.
Right.
But my only point in saying any of that is the transferring of music and information and the drums and the beats and the cadences and the frequencies and the vibrations. Like, this sounds like pseudo stuff, but this is actual verified science. And our ancestors even knew that way back then. That's where COVID come in at.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm agreeing, like you said, the drums were everywhere, bro. I'm just gonna tell you, the drums were everywhere, man.
Right.
And he mentioned communications. I did a presentation called the first form of communication, or the first telephone. The drums was, and I'm not saying nobody else said that, or I read it, just by me just dealing and doing numerous presentations on the drums and fascinated about what type of wood they use, what type of animal skin that they use, what type of how did they carve the instrument out, how did they dye the instrument, how did they shine, how did they do these certain things. So when you look and see, when we got here, we still had that form of communicating with each other, right? So they knew what type of skin that they needed to stretch across that wood, and how many inches and diameters that this drum needs to be, and how hollow and how deep that it needs to be in order for it to travel miles away to warn.
I thought we were primitive. I thought we were primitive.
Right.
I thought we was over there primitive, over there scratching our butt, looking lost.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, so that was, I'm saying, the first form of communication when we got here. We was able to communicate with each other by different drums. So there was various different drums. The only drum that people may know that is a popular drum that comes out of Mali is the djembe drum. So you hear us always talking about the djembe drum, but there was so many other different drums and so many different styles of drums where you use your hand, but you also had drums which you had to use a stick, you know, for the drums, right? So there was so many, which one of the drums is called a stick drum.
Right.
So they just knew how to, like I'm saying, the centimeters, the metrics, the hollowness, the deepness, what type of animal skin, how far to stretch it, how to put it on in order to make these long communications, you know what I'm saying, to other plantations to warn the next plantation or what's going on, or even if a revolt taking place, we're finna get ready to revolt, get ready for the plan or whatever the case may be. So they communicated through the music of the drum. Now the slave owner might have come through and they think they might be playing and rejoicing and doing what they're doing, but they ended up figuring that out too. So over here, drums got banned. Drums ended up getting banned because they ended up figuring out, oh, y'all communicating by this music, by these drums. Okay. So yeah, drums, I say, was the first form of communication, or the first phone here, because that's what a phone does. You can communicate with people long distances, right? So that's why I titled it that presentation, that drum was the first form of communication. Drums was the first telephone or cell phone.
And you know, I'm here in Louisiana, right? One of the biggest slave revolts in U.S. history happened in New Orleans a long time ago, right? So they would all get together on a Sunday, our only day off, and go to Congo Square. But they call it Congo Square. And like Kobe said, they had the music going. The whole time they're planning an insurrection, unbeknownst to these other people. But they dancing, they got the music going. And for those that don't know, I love martial arts, man. They're doing their different dances, but they're practicing martial art unbeknownst to them. You go into your capoeira, and the other kinds of martial art where it looked like they just dancing, and the music playing, and they saying so, but they're mimicking war tactics, fighting tactics. They're practicing.
That's
right,
and that's genius, man. You know, like when you think about it, that's genius. You know, whenever I was on the show with you brothers, and when the book was coming out, first off, I'd definitely like to say again, I appreciate the invite. I had such a great time. You had an elder brother on there, and you know, and so in preparing for this show, I kind of wanted you guys to, you know, build on what is the role of an elder in most African societies, and when it comes to here in us in the diaspora, like, what is the difference between an elder and somebody who's just older?
That's, you know, everybody love that, man. Elder versus older, like, you know, we've been brought up that it's just because somebody is older than you, you should respect them, right? You know, you should respect them no matter what, because they older than you, and that's how we looked at it. But again, that's we looking and we have learned something from somebody else's worldview and somebody else's perspective. That's why I always say we got to tell our own stories from our own perspective, our own worldview. So when we look at the worldview, or we look at it through the lens of our ancestors, you being older than me does not make you an elder, right? So there's certain things you have to go through and do in order to become an elder. When we start talking about the rites of passages, right? And being an elder sets you up to be an ancestor. We speak that word too loosely. Oh, the ancestors. But some of the people that you may have said as your ancestors totality of your family or society say they don't even speak his name, right? Because of the things that he did. So an elder and an older has two different things. An elder has a responsibility. An elder has a responsibility where he has to be an important role model. He has to be a role model, right? He has to have good character is another thing. He has to have good character. He has to be able to be a good beacon in his community. He have to be able to be strategic in a way that he's giving his lessons to the youth. He has to be able to gravitate and pull the youth up and educate them so that when they go out and become men and recognized as an adult, because one turning 18 or getting your driver license, becoming 21 here makes you make you an adult. In African culture, that doesn't make you an adult. There's things that you have to go to, and then your family, your society, and your community recognize you as an adult. You have reached the adulthood. So he has to prepare the youth. That is the main key. He has to prepare the youth and so the youth can transition into being a man and being able to take care of his family, his seeds, being an important figure in the community, teaching important and vital lessons to everyone amongst him. So he has to be responsible in his actions and in his deeds, right? So that is an elder, right? So an older is someone that we see that's hanging out on the street with his pants sagging, cussing, or even teaching a person how to sell poison in his neighborhood, or not being a right example when you see him beating up his wife at the community store, right? You know, these are not examples of being an elder. It is an older. So we must distinguish an elder between an older. So that's why I wrote that piece, because that part is an elder griot. Even though Keith Nicholson is our elder griot, he is also a master griot. Once you get, this guy has 42 publications and 52 manuscripts waiting to get publication. He's a writing machine, and he's excellent and superb at what he does, right? He's meritorious. That's his word he likes to use all the time, right, son? So he's meritorious, right? So we have to give him his flowers because he is a master griot, but he's an elder. So in order, before we go into talking about Keith, we have to establish what an elder and an older is and why we call him our elder griot. So it is definitely a difference between an elder and an older.
I want to add on to that real fast, man. You know, once again, I'm at an age in my life now, which is funny to me. On a lot of jobs I work on, I might be the oldest guy in the room now.
Right.
It happens so fast.
Yeah.
From being the mentee myself, to now people literally coming to you with a straight, serious face, asking you serious, I want to say life and death questions.
Right.
And they want your honest opinion, man, Mr. Sean. I'm thinking about what you think about this. And so now I gotta slow myself down, because I know that person hanging on my every word. Whatever I'm about to tell this young person, they're gonna really go and do it.
Right.
That's a whole different level of responsibility than just two homies just kicking it, just shooting the crap at work. Like, nah, this person really asking me a dire question about their relationship, about their household, about their finance, about whatever it might be, right? So now that we're getting to that older stage, we got to start making that deciphering how you want to be perceived at this latter part of your life. Are you an elder? Are you benefiting your community? Are you benefiting people around you? Are you just passing years on the calendar?
Right.
You're getting older by accident. You ain't getting no better.
Older by accident. Yeah, I like that. But no, that's real.
It's like going to a job, right? And they say, oh man, so-and-so, he a 20-year employee. Are you 20 years, like you got better every year?
Right.
Or you only managed not to get fired for 20 years? That's two different things.
Right. Two different things.
Even some relationships, they've been married for 20 years. Is that 20 years a thriving relationship? Or y'all just too lazy to get divorced? That's two different things.
Right.
So it's the same thing with our age. You getting better, you getting sharper, you getting progressive, or you man not to die in the pandemic, you know what I mean? You got by.
Right. I wanted to. I was thinking about this earlier. When it comes to the griot and in some West African societies, would is this a position that is given to you by, you know, belonging to a certain family? Is it the people that elect you this position? And if you can just talk about, you know, especially because in West Africa, right? Like how in, you know, different societies one actually gets this title.
They are groomed to be that. You are born to be a griot, meaning that my father and my mother was a griot, a grioti, right? So you're you're born into that role, and you are groomed into that role. So, and every griot and grioti don't serve, like we give a ton, a list of the roles of the griot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every role is going to be facilitated by a griot. I may only be a teacher, I may be an advisor, and I may be a musician. Sean may be a musician, an advisor, a storyteller, and a warrior, right? And someone you may yourself may be a warrior. You may be an ambassador and a historian, right? So you're groomed in whatever role it is that your family have. Like my family may be just, and I'm saying that too because I'm groomed, whether I look at it or not. I was groomed into this role, right? Even when you read the Art of Storytelling chapter 2, and most people will think that, damn, you and Sean, man, y'all smart, y'all was smart in school. Man, that was far from the case, but I was being groomed because most of my family on my father's side are teachers and preachers. So both of them are conveying information. Both of them are teaching, right? Both of them has to retain information. Both of them have to read it on a daily basis, and then they have to convey that information back, right, in a way that it hits for somebody to gravitate, to understand, right? So I've seen this my entire life, going to school, and even some of my aunties and my cousins, I was in their classrooms because they was my teachers. I was brought up in the church, so my grandmother, who they considered a prophetess, she also preached. My auntie, who they consider was a prophetess, and she's still a preacher. My father, who is a preacher, right? So I was groomed to be a griot, right? So I was groomed to be a teacher. I was groomed for this. So it's the same. One was born to be a griot when we deal with it from the aspect of a West African culture, because most of this term griot or grioti, you know, and these roles, even though these roles are not prevalent in East Africa, South Africa, North Africa, but they're mostly predominant in West Africa. That's why you will hear about the people in Mali talking about the griots. That's why you will hear about the people in Senegal talking about the griots and the griotis. That's why you will hear down in Benin the griots and the grioti. Cote d'Ivoire, you will hear about the griots, because those group of men and women was one of the most important roles in African society, right? Sean, on the last episode, you would think that the warrior, not the last episode, but the last interview, that the warrior would be the highly favored, not the intellectual, right? But the griot was. Sean, can you share what they did to the griots? They didn't go after the warriors. Who did they go after?
Yeah. It was the podcast I was on recently, and the podcast got released today before we came on the air, by the way. I'll share it out later.
Okay.
But it was this group of people called the Bards, right? Bards, Bards. You can look it up later tomorrow. And they were the griot of that area in the world, right? But whenever they were overtaken and colonized, they would round up all the scholars and execute them. We got to kill them. We got to kill their story. We got to kill their ability to tell.
Wow.
So we're going to round up all these scholars and storytellers and historians. We got to execute them off the top.
I want to ask you guys one last question. What happens when a society especially a Black society that has been through what we've been through, what happens when we don't transmit our histories via storytelling, via written word, via music, via all the other ways that we transmit our stories? What happens? Because Sean, you telling that story of how they rounded up the griots and the scholars and they killed them. Transport that to now, and we see the efforts that are made to stop us from telling our stories. What happens when we stop telling our stories?
In my opinion, you see it in culture. You're left grabbing at straws, trying to identify with something, right? So I'm not knocking anybody. I'm going to make an example. We're going to start doing some Buddhism and get some of their culture in line with that. I'm going to get some Arab things in line with that. I'm going to get some this thing, some Eastern things from Asia and whatnot in line with that. Like, you're trying to find something to align with. I'm going to get some kind of culture about myself and dress like them, talk like them, eat like them, pray to their religious deity, just trying to find something.
Right.
But the actual people from those places, they are deeply rooted in whatever that is.
Right.
Because they're from there. They didn't forget that. Right. And even here in the U.S., so many people that come over here, they're not just sending their children to school until 3 or 4 o'clock and then that's it.
Right.
They got after school programs. They got summer programs. They got weekend things they're doing. Like, yeah, you're going to school over here, but you're going to still learn our tradition, our culture, our holidays, our revered people.
Right.
You're not just going to their school.
Right.
They said that only a fool will let the oppressor educate your children, right? Somebody said that.
Malcolm.
There it is, right? So I think to answer your question, what happens is you just left grabbing that stuff because you want to identify with something so bad. I don't know if anybody listening did your DNA test. If you never did it, go out there and do it. But I tell you, for me, when I started to literally see my DNA and see people in my DNA, it did strengthen and embolden me a little bit more than what it was before, because I'm starting to see a trajectory.
Right.
But if you don't have that, what do you anchor to?
Right.
What do you more to? Right.
Yeah.
You out there just floating. So I'll leave it at that.
Indeed.
Can you, for one more time, ask that question one more time, man, and I'm gonna give you short and precise answer.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to say, what happens whenever we stop transmitting our history, whenever we stop transmitting our folk tales and our cultural mores to the next generation? What happens?
Oh man, Sean kind of wrapped it all up. We're gonna be grabbing one, like he said, grabbing. We're definitely gonna lose who we are, right? Our identity, which we already have lost our identity, and we're grabbing to anything. I'm a Native American over here. No, I'm Buddha. I'm Buddhist over here. No, I'm a Hebrew. It's all these things we're gravitating to these different identities because we already done lost who we are as a self. But if we stop doing this, right, because there are surges of what I call people are regaining their consciousness, right, and understanding who they are and gravitating toward the things that they need to learn about themselves to strengthen their families, and then able to go out and strengthen communities, and then from there strengthen their community, states, and other countries, right? So if we stop, we're going to end up continuously making the same mistakes that our ancestors made, and the same mistakes that we are seeing ourselves make in real time today, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
But before we go, I want to ask you guys this question, because what you said kind of sparked something. I saw somebody online the other day, and it's no disrespect to them. I disagreed, but so I'm not going to say any names, but they made a comment that said, all African Americans do is think about the past and pout. I reminded him that Dr. John Henry Clark said the past is the present, right? And what are you, I think that kind of goes back to what both of you guys were saying. If we don't focus on both, we have to be able to focus on both the past and the present simultaneously.
That's correct.
Look what I was saying too, right? Even with that concept we're talking about right here, the manipulation of time. That's not the way our ancestors saw time. How we see time right now.
We saw that's cyclical. We saw that in a cipher, man. It was not linear.
That's why them people saw the Mayan calendar and they saw, oh man,
and they got confused.
The world gonna end. That cycle ended. That cycle reset at this particular point. It didn't end. It's not linear.
Right.
So you're correct. When you said the past is the present, is always happening, that is the most true statement today.
Right.
It's always important to be in Sankofa, looking back, right? To go forward. That's a loaded thing. When you say a little small thing like that, that's loaded. That's heavy.
It's very loaded. Right. No, you absolutely.
The time. Now look at this. Look how they do it. But back to the fiction, Marvel and DC Comics, they're showing you the quantum universe now in the multiverse.
Right. And so and like you mentioned it, like the Sankofa bird is looking backwards, man. You know what I'm saying? We must never forget, and we must always continue. And to be honest with you, and it was somebody who calls themselves African centered, but the fact of the matter is, it is European to forget about to even think that it's okay for us to stop telling our story. It's okay for us to stop looking backwards. It's okay for us. Yeah, it's foolishness.
Foolishness. Everybody else is not doing it. Everybody else is not doing it.
Who is doing that? Right. Exactly.
I was saying, fellas, who over there telling the victims of World War II, man, forget about the Holocaust?
Nobody.
Who over there telling any other place in the world, forget about your tragedy, forget about this thing that happened. But when it comes to us,
right?
Remember that old saying, the buck stops here? For some reason, when it comes to us, the buck stops here. Y'all got to forget and get over that. I don't know where that came from.
Right.
Like just us.
Right.
Forget,
just us.
Don't worry about it. Don't get no reparations. Don't get no kind of reprieve. No kind of nothing. Even Native Americans have all kind of kickbacks.
Oh, most definitely.
So what happened to them?
Most definitely. Right? Yep. And
that's why people say this, right? People say, man, y'all been here for all these hundreds of years and y'all still coming up. But these other cultures come here in a matter of time and they owning things. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
They come here and get all kind of kickbacks.
Oh yeah, it's systemic. They want you to feel like it's either you understand that it's a systemic issue, or you think that we are an inferior people. It's only one or the other. Right? You know what I'm saying? But for everybody who, for one, thank you guys for coming on, man. This has definitely been an amazing conversation. I appreciate it. For those who are just, getting familiar with the Griot podcast, let everybody know where they can find it, when they can watch it. I'll definitely have the link in the description. But again, just kind of let everybody know what to expect moving forward with the podcast.
All right. Well, the Griot podcast, it's a visual and it's an audio. The visual, we go live once a month at the end of the month, and we go live from my channel, Kofi Piche TV. That's on YouTube. And following after the the podcast, we transfer it and we do audio. So if you want to listen to it in your car, you want to listen to it while you're at the desk at work, you want to listen to it while you're cleaning up, you can go to Spotify or Anchor and listen to it. The podcast, man, each episode, 5 episodes in, which you was a part of episode 5. We finna get ready at the end of the month, do episode 6, which I'm kind of amped about. Poor Righteous Teacher is the name of the next episode. Dope. I think you need to tap into it. We talk about the 5%ers and some other issues. And Man, I think you're gonna love the episode too, man.
Almost definitely. I'm a big fan of the show. I not only appreciate the conversation and the knowledge that y'all kick, but as Sean mentioned earlier, the chemistry and is entertaining, right? It makes for an entertaining show. And I think that is fitting to have a podcast called the you know the Griot podcast, because the Griot couldn't be boring. This is the reason why they would tell stories in a storytelling format, or have musical expressions of ideas in order to keep one's attention, and y'all do that very well. Again, brother Sean, brother Kofi, I wanted to say, man, I appreciate y'all for coming on. This definitely won't be the last time I have y'all on. We got so much to talk about, man, when it comes to our people and what we want to do moving forward. For everybody, again, the link will be in the description. Everybody go purchase the book. Go purchase the book. And just show your appreciation for two brothers that are working hard to tell our story, to shine light on different ideas within Black life, Black culture, Black history. It's very important that we continue to appreciate and respect those among us that are doing that work. It's not easy. It's not easy. All of this stuff that we're doing is like a second job sometimes, man. It requires a lot of work. And so definitely support these brothers. Go to go to Spotify, follow them, go to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, hit the bell and the notifications. Also, when it comes to the Wise of Dome podcast, make sure you go subscribe on Spotify and Apple as well, because we are on there. Thank you for everybody.
Can I say one more?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I just wanted you. We hold the book up. I just want to make this clear. The book, by supporting us, go to www.sametreedifferentbranchpublishing.com. They are placed on other placements and other print-on publishing companies. Buy it directly from us. My brother got the shirt on right now. That's also available. Patronize the author directly. So patronize us directly. Go to that website. If you can't remember the website, just DM me or Facebook Messenger me or Sean, man, and we'll make sure we get the book to you.
No doubt, no doubt. And with that, man, we'll say peace. Tune in next time, and we'll definitely have another powerful show. But thank you, brothers, for coming in.
Peace, man. Appreciate it.